Hi, everyone. My name is Riley Taggett. I am an intern with the Vision Center, and today I am interviewing Elijah Tapp. He's an emerging healthcare professional building a career around serving older adults and people with disabilities. He discovered a passion for working with older adult populations while studying health policy and administration at Penn State, where a professor encouraged him to explore opportunities in senior living to fulfill his desire to be an advocate for individuals who slip through the cracks of the healthcare system. Elijah recently completed an administrator in training program at Barclay Friends, a Kendall affiliate in Westchester, Pennsylvania, that provided a full continuum of care to older adults in a not-for-profit Quaker influence setting. He aspires to protect the dignity and rights of people who live in long-term care homes by becoming a licensed nursing home administrator and by seeking opportunities to collaborate on creative endeavors that improve the level of autonomy available to people as their functional abilities change. This coincides with the Vision Center's aim to inspire passionate students in the field of aging services to meet leadership needs of the country with quality higher education programs and partnerships for rewarding, impactful careers. So I know it says that a professor inspired you to go into senior living. How did that start? Was your AIT your first field experience, or did you have prior experience before that?
So my AIT was my second kind of field experience. I had been studying political science initially in school, and I wasn't really enjoying that. I wasn't feeling like I could really imagine a direction that it would take me. And I started studying healthcare spending and became really fascinated by that and ended up switching my major that semester to health policy and administration. And once I met my accounting professor in that program, I spoke to him a little bit about my goals and how I wanted to help people who were experiencing, access problems or financial problems or lack of representation in healthcare. And I wanted to see if I could find a career where I'd be able to advocate for people and form relationships with people. And that professor, fortunately, was an administrator for many years of his career. And he encouraged me to start thinking about senior living. So I was able to take the 120-hour class as part of my undergraduate career, which set me up kind of on the path to earn that nursing home administrator license.
Mhm.
The following summer, I did an internship in a senior living organization in the compliance department. So that was my sort of introduction to actually working in communities and going to visit places, be in the building. Um, and then after I graduated at the end of that year, I worked as a server in a different CCRC for a little bit. So that was sort of my introduction. And then when I found out about the AIT program with Barclay Friends, I moved over to Westchester to come do the program here at Barclay.
Gotcha. I actually was a server in a CCRC and a rental community. That's how I kind of got started with like career wise in senior living. So that's interesting. I feel like that's where it starts for a lot of people, honestly. They
Mhm.
get you into the food service, you kind of just get accustomed and want to stay with it.
Yeah, exactly. And I had come from a food service background prior to
Oh,
working in
okay.
healthcare at all. So it felt really natural for me to come into a position of doing food preparation and food service and customer service. And I think the fact that I came from that area and then I just had to work with a new population, that was a really great way for me to be introduced to working with older adults and kind of start developing those communication skills and the skills that you need to really be there for this population.
Yeah. So, you just finished up your AIT. What would you say are some major takeaways that you've learned from that?
I would say from the whole experience I've had, probably the biggest takeaway is just that collaboration and communication across the full community are vital. Um, and I've been very fortunate that I've had a chance to learn how to build some of those skills of what type of communication do you need to implement when you're trying to get a message out to the whole community versus something needs to happen in the building by the end of the day. How are we going to get everyone on the same page? Um, it's so much teamwork and it's so much change and adaptability. And I think everyone who works in this field, no matter what department that may be in senior living, it takes a tremendous amount of adaptability and creativity.
Yeah. So if you just finished up your AIT, what are you doing now, or what are your future career aspirations in the senior living field?
So I ultimately would like to become an administrator. I'm in kind of the middle of the whole process right now with getting that license. So hopefully I'll be taking the exams pretty soon. Um, but honestly, the AIT experience taught me so much more than I expected about myself. It definitely prepared me as far as getting exposure to different departments and learning about operations and learning about managing the budget and coordinating all of the services and doing everything with compliance for all of the regulations. Um, but it also really helped me figure out more specific areas within this world that I feel I fit in. And I've really enjoyed the resident relations and community relations. So I'm actually heading into kind of a resident services and social services direction in the interim while I'm still working on getting that NHA license. And then I think after a little bit more experience, um, hopefully moving into a position where I can be in an administrative role.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say like the management of funds or like anything to do with money and numbers, that's the part I'm not looking forward to when it comes to an AIT because it's definitely not the area where I'm most talented. I will say that much.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I felt the same way for sure coming in. Like I had, very minimal accounting background from school
mhm.
and um, YouTube videos, like
Yeah.
those how-tos and some of those things are really helpful. But it's also given me peace of mind to know that most of the time in senior living communities, there's not one person in charge of something on their own.
Mhm.
It's part of, how you keep things ethical and transparent. And it's also just sort of a risk management practice not to have one person able to access information. So
Yeah.
even when it comes to finances, fortunately, I've been able to experience a lot of collaboration there where one person might generate the document, but another person is actually analyzing it and interpreting it for what that means for the business future. And in the Quaker philosophy, collaboration is a really important thing. So it works really naturally that that's been such a big part of how things are done here in this community. Um, Pretty much every decision gets made by some form of consensus where everyone gives their feedback and we all kind of figure out what's the best way to move forward given what we all know. So even when it comes to finances, that's been one of the kind of points of relief for me from having gone through the AIT now is knowing that, you're never going to be in a position where you're independently trying to figure something out and there's no one there to help. And people who work in this industry are very anxious to help. They want to give their knowledge and their skills and they want to offer whatever they can to support newer people who are coming in through. So it's definitely nice to know that, even when things are intimidating, there's always avenues to kind of figure things out and build up your knowledge.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Speaking of, when you say like Quaker philosophy, what exactly does that mean? I've never heard that verbiage used when it comes to senior living.
Yeah, so this part of Pennsylvania, in the kind of southeastern region, has a lot of Quaker history, and a lot of the communities around here are Quaker affiliated in some way. And the majority of our residents are not actually practicing Quakers as far as their religious beliefs, but um, it does come into effect with our board and our policies and procedures and the kind of general operations of the community. It's all influenced by the values that are inherent in Quaker beliefs. And some of the most important ones that come up are the concept of collaboration and like team decision making. Um, Equality is a really big thing, which of course works well in long term care, where we've got this focus on person-centered care and dignity and autonomy for the residents. Um, the fact that we truly have that ingrained in our culture here, that every person is valuable, every person deserves to have self-determination, and it's really important that at the end of the day, that's the reason we're all here working together, is to kind of reinforce that for the residents. Um, it comes down to just the way that we do meetings here. We usually open with a moment of silence for everyone to kind of center and just get on the same page. And that's a practice that I wasn't familiar with prior to coming to this community, but I've really enjoyed some of those elements and practices.
Wow. Yeah, that's really unique. I've never heard of that. So that's why I was wondering, because I somewhat know what a Quaker is. I'm not gonna lie and say I know exactly what they are. I haven't learned about it since high school, but that's really unique that I've never heard of that before. Are there other communities that do that in the area that you're in?
There are a few that I've been able to visit. Friend Services Alliance is one of the partners that's kind of behind this AIT program I'm doing.
Hmm.
And they're a Quaker compliance organization. They support Quaker affiliated communities.
Hmm.
So I do know there's kind of a pocket in this region of Pennsylvania where we've got a lot really saturated, but there are Quaker communities across the country. And from the ones that I've been to and visited, they all do kind of have those same beliefs inherent of, taking care of each other and being good stewards to each other. And you can even see that displayed in the way the residents behave and interact with each other. And a lot of them have shared with me that coming to a Quaker community was important to them because even if they weren't Quakers themselves, it aligns enough with their values, and they wanted to be in a place that had values like that, where people care for each other and information is shared transparently, and we strive to do things with utmost integrity and all of those things.
Hmm.
It definitely attracts people to the community to have that sort of that peaceful lifestyle where we try to do good to each other.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that's a unique experience that you'll have that probably a lot of other people won't. So that's actually really cool.
Yeah,
Earlier you mentioned resident relations. Is there a specific resident or interaction that sticks out to you that was like a really good memory or a reason why you were like, this is definitely the career path I want to go down? Anything like that?
I would say with that question, it's not necessarily one resident,
Hmm.
but I think there's a pretty big group of residents at this point that over time I've gotten to know. And the more people I get to know, I kind of just feel like I'm so lucky to have that exposure. And I'm pretty sure I'm not going to forget about these people. And, you know, um, when things come up and there's challenges, I'll often kind of reflect on it. Oh, what did we do when so and so was having this problem, and how did we handle it? And a lot of times, uh, the solutions and kind of the creativity that we have to use, it really comes from the residents. And um, coming into this community, I did have a little bit of experience working in senior living, but this is the first skilled nursing facility that I've been in. So here I have exposure to memory care and to people with kind of higher acuity health needs. So I've gotten a lot more experience working with individuals with dementia. And I think in general, that population of folks is what has really kind of inspired me,
Hmm.
just to learn how much values there, and to meet people who, when I was coming into this and didn't have as much knowledge, I would have kind of assumed, they're not going to remember who I am. If they have dementia and they're meeting me today, they're not going to know me tomorrow. And at first I was kind of surprised, and over time it's just gotten to be one of those like really lovely parts of the job where you come in and you get to talk to someone who, you mean something to them, and they might not know what your name is, but they recognize your face and they remember that last time they talked to you, they felt safe and they felt like they were being heard.
Hmm.
And so they wave to you when they see you. And you get to know people's behaviors that are specific to them and what it might mean about what they need. And I think that's really kind of magical when someone trusts you enough to open up and like show the way that they communicate, and they trust that you're there for them.
Hmm.
I think that's probably the experience that sticks with me the most.
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting part is I feel like a lot of people who work in senior living do have like misconceptions even going into the career field. I mean, I personally didn't because I grew up going to these communities, so I there was really no room for misconception, but
Mm.
most of the people I've talked to in the field, it's like I had no idea before going into it that this was like that or that I was totally wrong about this. So it's really interesting to hear about the people who go into the field knowing that they had these misconceptions that end up not even being true. So makes you wonder what misconceptions people have who don't work in senior living. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah. And I think you're so right that um, people come into the field with misconceptions and they are humbled pretty quickly. Um, and I think that's one of the really cool experiences I've had, and another piece of value that comes from working with older adults, because in a lot of ways, these residents, by the time they're in a skilled nursing home, they've had a little bit of experience with the healthcare system, and they've been in some positions where maybe a physician wasn't giving them as much information about the problem as they wanted to know, or they weren't feeling like they were included in the planning of their own healthcare. And of course, this happens across the whole spectrum of healthcare, but with older adults, this is a population that they've lived decades and they've achieved things. They've had careers and they've traveled and they've had relationships and all sorts of life experience and wisdom that they can share. And it's really sad for someone to have all of that life experience and then all of a sudden they sort of start being left out.
Hmm.
And I think from that experience, a lot of older adults have so much more resilience and acceptance than we really give them credit for.
Hmm.
Um, Even in the sense that when a new professional is in this field and there's things to learn, often the most compassionate and patient individuals that you'll come across are the residents themselves.
Hmm.
Um, and I just think that's really special when, I've been in a situation where I clearly didn't know what I was doing. And rather than exploiting that or, having that be something where it feels like it opens you up and you're like, oh my God, I'm not prepared. Instead, it's sort of like the residents they're used to this,
Hmm.
they've gone their whole lives figuring out how to make things work for themselves. So they'll make it work for you too. They'll loop you in and share whatever they can offer to kind of help you catch up. And I think it's really cool when people teach me what they need from
Hmm.
me.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. This last summer, I did an internship down in Florida, and the community was huge. I had to ask the residents, like, "Where's the elevator?" They had to
Mhm.
help me directionally because I had no clue where I was going. I was like,
Yeah.
where is like the dining hall?" Like, I did not know where anything was, and the residents were like, "I'll walk you there." So
Yeah.
it's really interesting to see that because you're right. Like, they are the ones who definitely show the most compassion, especially if you are new and younger.
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
So,
it's really beautiful.
do you think that the misconceptions of senior living are holding back people from wanting to do it as a career?
I think so.
Hmm.
I mean, I can't say that I had any super negative misconceptions where I was sort of not interested in working
Hmm.
in that field. It was more just something that I hadn't given much thought. And in my undergraduate program studying healthcare, it is surprising how little we talked about services for people who are aging.
Hmm.
Um, you learn so much about hospitals and all of these things that are going on in healthcare, but we all know that our society is gradually aging and the workforce is going to need a lot of support if we're going to have people there to take care of people when they need it. Um, so I think one of the things that could really get in the way is just that people they don't know, and then if they do know, they might have a bad misconception based
Hmm.
on something they've read in the news. I mean, there's a lot of media coverage, unfortunately, of places that aren't doing such a great job.
Hmm.
And it's really sad when bad things happen in these communities because a lot of times we look at it and we think like, how did this happen? Or how did we not see this coming?
Hmm.
Nobody wants those things to happen, but I don't think that the majority of communities are having those experiences where really serious adverse events are taking place. Um, and I think being honest about the fact that we have things to learn and we have a chance to grow. And instead of saying, like we do the best care and we're never going to mess up, it's important to say, we might make mistakes and we have to persist and we have to keep learning and figure out how to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I think maybe people just don't realize how much potential there is in this field to make
Yeah.
a difference. Like there's a lot of work to do, and I just don't think people necessarily know that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you there. It's interesting that you said your school doesn't really have a big focus on like senior living or, long-term care because or I go to Western Kentucky and it's the same thing. They push the acute. We only have like one long-term care teacher. People mostly opt out of the classes, I think. So it's really interesting to see how it's not just my school that seems to
Hmm.
like definitely want acute. But yeah, I would agree with you. I think that when it comes to senior living, the bad publicity always outweighs the good publicity. People already have these impressions and then they see it and they just immediately jump on it. And I think it's a lack of education of the people who are reading this information. I mean, most people couldn't differentiate from independent living to assisted living. They all just assume it's all one thing. So I think that there's just a lack of education along with the misconception that really points out the bad apples instead of showcasing like the amazing communities that there are out there. They
Hmm.
just always focus on the bad. So I think that's definitely an outlook that needs to be changed. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I do, I mean, I kind of never shut up about it, with my friends and family about how much I love the work I do because
Mhm.
even 3 years ago, I couldn't have told you that this is where I would be. Um, and it really took just a couple people pushing me in the right direction and saying, "Hey, I think you should consider this." And once I got in and kind of saw it for myself, I was immediately interested and wanted to keep coming back and learn more about these people. So I think, yeah, just a little bit of good exposure goes a long way because it's really easy to think the bad stuff is all that's out there, but
Mhm.
um, it's such a heavily regulated industry. There's so much administrative work to do. There's so much clinical work to do.
Mhm.
There's, innovations happening with technology and how technology can assist us with better diagnostics and better care and better financial management and all sorts of things. I've met really cool people who are doing their postgraduate education, studying new technologies and coming up with these new ideas. And I think that's so cool that there are people coming from other disciplines such as
Mhm.
engineering or chemistry or computer science, and they're coming into this field and finding a way that they can use their skills to make a difference in people's
Mhm.
lives. So I think it's just, we got to push that narrative and help people understand what's really out there beyond that negative publicity.
Yeah, that's what I always say. You don't have to be in a community, you don't have to be hands-on. Like I think that's another big thing. People are like, "Oh, well, I don't really a lot of it is I don't know if I can be around old people." It's like you don't have to work in a community. If you're going to work in senior living, you probably should have the passion to care for the senior living or like, the older generation. But in reality, you could work in accounting for a senior living company. You could do
Right.
really anything. So I think that that's another reason that people don't think of it. They just immediately assume, oh, I'm going to be like a caregiver. And that's just not it whatsoever.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not for everyone. Some people love it and they do it for their whole lives. And I think those people are really incredible. Um, but yeah, you're absolutely right. There's so many avenues you can go with a career in this field.
Hmm.
And I think, like you said, it's great to have that experience and that passion. Getting into the building and just spending some time there to see how things go
Hmm.
can really help with branching out into other disciplines. But um, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of different ways things could go. And even I think of the people who write compliance articles and different articles online where they kind of break down regulations and explain them, or they talk about, here's what this law firm did for risk management for this kind of problem with fall rates in the community. And there are administrators and professionals and nurses and people all over the country who are using those resources. And somebody's got to create that stuff.
Hmm.
There's all sorts of consulting and compliance and writing, analytical type of skills that people can bring without ever having to step foot in a community.
Hmm. So with all that being said, how do you think that senior living can reach out to the younger generations like high school or college to change their minds and maybe have them considering senior living as a career?
I think it's a combination of knowing yourself and knowing what your skills are and what you want that to look like. Um, and then just kind of taking a risk and taking a chance and trying something new. Um, I think it was really important for me to just get into the building and kind of be around people and get a feel for it. And that was what ultimately helped me fall in love with this line of work and want to stay here and build a whole career here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would definitely encourage people to just get out, even if you can just shadow someone for a day. Um, I've yet to come across anyone in this field who's in a kind of a professional role who says no when I ask for help or ask for their
Mm-hmm.
feedback. And there are a lot of people who've been extremely generous as far as answering my questions or sharing perspectives about what their experience was like when I'm unsure of what things are going to look like for me. And if you can find those people and, let them know that you're thankful for them, let them know what they mean to you, and they'll really help you out. So I think kind of like that concept of mentorship, if you can find someone to help you figure out what are your skills going to be used
Mm-hmm.
for, and then just get out there and try it. Think about that's going to be all of us one day, whether we want to think about
Yeah.
it or not. And I'm really relieved that I've had my own perspectives on aging so challenged by this experience, because it makes me feel much more optimistic about my own future and
Mm-hmm.
the future for family members and loved ones and all of that, to be here and to realize, oh, this is a really great place. Nursing
Yeah.
homes aren't like a sad place where people go to be neglected. And
Mm-hmm.
that just makes me feel so much more confident for everyone that I care about.
Mm-hmm.
So I think find a way to personalize it, find a way to get support and find a way to make it work for you. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the best way to kind of enter into this field.
Yeah, I think that you bring up a good point of like even just getting people in the community, because the amount of times that I've been on like a tour with marketing or whatever, and a resident or a resident family member will immediately walk in and say, "Oh, well, I didn't know it was going to look like this." People just have the this picture in their mind that it's like a dingy
Mhm.
cafeteria with like a hospital bed in it. So I
Mhm.
think that, you even see people like initial reactions is, oh wait, this is not at all what I thought it was. Like, I don't
Mhm.
think people realize that majority of senior livings are, it's actually a privilege to be able to afford it to live there, and that they're basically a
Absolutely.
luxury living experience. So I think
Mhm.
that I think just, getting people in the door, whether it's employees or residents or anything, I think that that's definitely a key piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting into the community and getting to see what it's all about and
Mm-hmm.
experience that luxury, because you're right. I mean, there's a huge access problem with this
Mm-hmm.
field. And I think, if we want to really expand it, there's even more opportunity when you start getting into that side of things. You don't even have to work in a community. You can work in the larger community and help connect people to services so that they can age in place. This whole concept of how are we going to help everyone age in place is such a big, important question for the future
Mm-hmm.
for public health officials and people in this field and everything. So, whether it's getting into the community and having those misconceptions broken down or even exploring beyond that, there's just so much that can be done.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we're going to need is people with passion coming in the door saying, I want to do this and I want to find a way I can be helpful here. So,
Yeah. I totally agree. Well, Elijah, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. Again, Elijah is a recent graduate of an AIT program, and I am Riley Taggett, an intern with the Vision Center. Thank you all for listening. Bye.
thank you, Riley.